Welcome everybody to the PFF College Football Podcast. I'm Seth Galina alongside Diante Lee. And Diante, what's going on?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm good. Important pod news to break on this week's podcast. I did throw 4 touchdowns in my flag football game. Important pod news is we are rebranding the pod. So Diante is officially co-host of the pod along with myself, and it will no longer be the PFF College Football Podcast. Instead, we will be, we have a name, but we're not going to reveal that yet. Mm-hmm. It's going to be same type of discussions, same type of, I don't like calling them scheme discussions. I just like talk. This is how we talk about football, and we're going to talk about football like this. But we are going to incorporate a lot more NFL because we just feel like we're doing a disservice to talk to that type of talk. Like, we want to talk about the NFL, so we're going to get to do it on the kind of new podcast, which I believe the first episode will be at the end of August. So that's when you'll get it. So Diante, officially you're part of the pod now.
Yeah, man, and I'm really looking forward to the rebrand. I mean, just like you said, it's not so much about like, oh, we want to do less of college football, we want to do more of the NFL. I just think that the kind of conversations that we have, it just makes the most sense to broaden it, right? You just want to have as broad of a lens as possible because there are certain interesting things that'll come up, at all levels of football that, whether it's trickling up or trickling down or recognizing new trends, like we want to be able to identify all of that stuff as it's happening, and use that to kind of contextualize the game. And working closely with you on a lot of things, it's pretty clear that we kind of look at this from, a similar viewpoint, me from the defensive perspective, mostly you from the offensive perspective, mostly. And yeah, I just think it's a really good pairing, and I'm looking forward to what the rebrand is like and being able to kind of open up what we're talking about. So that way we're covering everything that's happening in football as much as we can.
Yeah, I think that's the main thing. It's just covering everything. Well, basically, it's going to end up just being a high school football podcast, but that's another story. So today in the podcast, we had Nevada starting quarterback Carson Strong on the program to talk through what makes him really a great quarterback and what makes that offense go in Nevada, and talking about their upcoming schedule, which is going to be a lot harder than they faced last year. And that was a really fun discussion, getting to talk to, back-to-back weeks now, or I think back-to-back weeks, we talked to a starting D1, FBS quarterback. So excited to get to that. But first, we wanted to circle back around to some of the stuff we were talking about last week and the stuff that Diante and me are working on for the website, because there's really interesting discussions. So Diante, you have by the time everyone's listening to this, you can go on pff.com, find Diante's piece on dime defenses in the NFL. So take the floor, my good sir.
Yeah, I think that the number one thing I was looking at, and I was kind of drawing the analogy in the piece, and this is something I do a lot on the podcast, right, is like making these kind of like basketball-like comparisons, because I think that when you start talking about the way that football is changing, I think it's something that we're seeing across a bunch of different sports. And body types are changing. The way that things are being approached from an offensive perspective is changing. And this is something that I think has been tackled on this site, and many other analysts have looked at this as well. And the idea of balance has changed. We're not seeing, 50-50 balance in the number one personnel groups in the NFL anymore. Teams are playing more 11, and they're in 11 for obvious reasons. They want to pass the ball more, whether it's getting the ball out of guys' hands quickly, trying to set up different type of play action looks, things like that. But the split is like 70-30. So if you're seeing more pass, I was interested in why we don't see more pass first defense if we know that we're looking at more pass first offense. And, I wanted to be able to look at that outside of just the context of third down, right? I think that what we see a lot is people who say, well, you can't run dime because you just get beat up in the run game. And that's a preconception that I had too. So I wanted to look and see, hey, on first and second down, if you're in 11 as an offense and you're seeing dime, are you really able to punish it the way that people think about it? And I think the truth is that the opportunity is there, yes. Like you will absolutely see teams in dime get beat up in the run game. I think we've all watched the Packers, plenty. So we've seen what it looks like when it goes badly, But what I think you get in terms of trade-off, in terms of like shrinking the field for a quarterback, not giving up as many explosive passes. I think that there's more justification to use dime on early downs. That doesn't mean that you become a 60% dime defense team on first and second down, right? That's a little over the top. But to only see it be used on like 10%, 10 to 15% of snaps for most teams in the NFL that do use it, I think that we just need a different type of look defensively.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that, like you said, you have these preconceived notions, especially when it comes to running the football. And the past few years, I've just been realizing how difficult it is to run the football. No matter what the circumstance, it is just difficult to run the football, especially once we talk about the NFL. High school, certain college levels, okay, that's a totally different story. But the NFL level, it's just really hard to run the football. So, I did a study last year about 2 high defense versus 1 high defenses, and just found that, yeah, you can get more joy out of running the football against 2 high defenses. Or like if you're on the defensive side, like, yeah, you are going to get run on a little bit more. You're going to entice them to run the football, and their efficiency will go up a bit, but it's not even close to the difference between run and pass. Like you still need to put players on the field that can defend the pass more than you can defend the run, because even if you're playing too high, you're playing dime, you're getting run on, but it's not affecting the game that much. And I think you had said this to me like a few days ago, where it's like, yeah, you just feel like more teams should allow teams to run on them, because it's just not doing the damage that we think it would.
Right. And I mean, sometimes the best answer is the simplest one. How do offenses score? Explosive plays. Where do you get explosive plays? In the passing game. So what should you do? Mitigate the passing plays that create explosive plays. And the best way to do that, at least at the NFL level, right, is to have better coverage players on the field. It's harder to find mismatches. It's harder to generate explosive plays. We talked about this with Brandon Staley. You and I have spoken about this, when it's just us, layering the defense differently. Now, one thing I will say, and this is something that's not in the article, but I'm kind of interested to see for teams that do play dime, we start talking about like tight fronts. That's something that we've talked about a lot. I think that's where that's where we should see a ton of like the tight front 4-eye, 0-4-eye defense with 2 like safeties or your nickel and your 4th best coverage player as your overhangs with 2 high safeties, right? Like that's what makes the most sense. What I think that we should see phased out in dime defense is more of like the 4-1-6 stuff, like the stuff that you would see like Alabama or Georgia run like at the college level. You'll probably see a little bit less of that, I think, if you're going to get more early down dime usage, because it's just asking a lot of guys in terms of like where you have to rotate the defense to be able to stop the run, the kind of coverages that are available to you. And I think that, as we continue to talk about pass rush versus coverage, I think that there are different ways to threaten a protection. If you've got 3 down linemen and all these different layers that you can fire guys in terms of pressure for, you can play drop 8 if you need to. You still have 2 traditional linebackers on the field, so the capability to stop the run is still there, even if it's not at as high a level as your 4-2-5 or 3-3-5 nickel looks. And again, you have your overhangs on both sides. You can have 2 high safeties, and now you can play 3-over-2 on both sides. So it's just a different way to look at defending offenses. And if you're dealing with teams that are going to get into 12 personnel or more 21, then it serves you more to play nickel, instead, or play more base instead. But if you know that you're getting these 11 personnel teams and they're doing that to try to get the ball out to either their X receiver or their guy in the slot, then why not just put extra coverage bodies there, and dictate to an offense what you are allowing them to have. And if it's going to be 4.5, 5 yards per carry, for the option to say, hey, you're not going to get in the 2nd and short, you're not going to get in the 3rd and short, because the option for us to pressure and create negative plays is there. If you pass the ball, you're not going to turn 1st and 10 into another 1st and 10 because of a 10 to 12 yard completion. That's the kind of marginal growth that I think we can see on the defensive side of the ball that I'm hoping to see more defensive coaches get comfortable.
Yeah, so the tight front stuff is really why I think we will see it explode going forward. And it's just because I can understand if you're a defensive coordinator not wanting to be in an over or under front and dime personnel. Like I can understand not wanting to get gashed directly down your throat, basically, in the B gap. We talk about the B gap, bust the B gap. Find the B gap and bust it. If you're an offensive coordinator, offensive team, and now you're doing that with one less run stopping player on the field. If you're removing a linebacker for a dime player, so I think as we see more defenses, we've already seen this in college football. Everyone runs tight front in college football now. As we see it more in the NFL, we will start seeing more dime because it plays into the whole thing. Like you're trying to put more speed on the field because you're trying to, as they say, get the ball to roll off the table and clog up the B gaps and get the ball going horizontally where you can use that speed. And you don't need necessarily so many players that it can go and take on blocks from offensive guards and offensive tackles and centers and destruct those blocks. You just need guys who can go and destruct crack back or something like that. So I think the tight front stuff is probably why, if we were talking about this next year, we talk about this in 2 years, we should, I would imagine we should be saying, yes, we have seen an increase in dime defenses in the NFL.
Right. And, to kind of switch gears and kind of talk about some of the stuff that you've been working on. I know that you've had a lot of stuff that you've been looking into in terms of like the pistol and what's happening in the run game with pistol offenses, especially at the college level. If you can kind of fill us in on what that's been about.
So basically, we had on the PFF 2-for-1 Drafts podcast, Austin Gale interviewed Eli Drinkwitz from Missouri. And, he messaged me. He was like, yo, I love this interview. And you guys should go check it out, 2-for-1 Drafts on, whatever device you're listening on, whatever app you listen on. So he was like, yo, this guy's amazing. I'm so into Missouri right now. So, and then I started thinking, I know what Missouri's into. He's coming from App State, and they're running pistol, and they're trying to get wide. Pistol and wide zone. Pistol, wide zone, boot. That's the offense. And you're seeing it kind of proliferate around college football a bit. Louisiana Lafayette. Oregon was still into it, even though they changed coordinators. Oregon was still into the pistol. More of a downhill run game, but still in the pistol. With that said, under, I forgot the OC's name, Arroyo, I think was the OC there at Oregon, now at UNLV, I think. So pistol outside zone. More App State, App State 100%, and more App State connections. Scott Satterfield at Louisville. And there's probably a few more teams that I can't think of right now. Getting into pistol and running that horizontal stretch play. And it was curious to me because I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Let's go back in time and remember when the pistol took us all by storm in 2010 in Nevada, where it was invented, and Colin Kaepernick was the quarterback. And they ran it. You can run whatever you want with a pistol, right? That's just a formation. But what they were doing and what made them, I think they went 13-1 in Kaepernick's last year. What made them really good was they were running a downhill type of running. It was option football, right? And one of the things I wrote about in the article,
option, zone read, all of that type of stuff.
One of the things that I wrote about in the article is the way the technique that the quarterback would use was a very flex bony type of technique. So he would take the snap and then move kind of backwards off his line where he was to allow the running back, who was obviously directly behind him, to just have free access right down the pipe. And then he would read it. So it kind of looked like zone read, like you said, veer read, whatever. So that was the offense. And then you can have whatever you want off of it, right? So you can have all your slices, your bluffs, your orbits, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, that's not even a Nevada thing too. Like Urban Meyer, even from the gun, would do that. Give up the midline, even if it looks like offset gun, you give up the midline. The running back steps basically to where the quarterback was, and you're still running like your midline, zone, veer, option type of stuff with all the slicers, the cutters, and just like you were saying, all the different type of run tags that you'll get off of that. So that was definitely the way the pistol used to be popularized, maybe 5-10 years ago.
Well, just to stay on the Urban Meyer stuff, because it's like I wrote this in the article, basically like, so one of the reasons why I think that they want the pistol is because it's two things. It's this is like 2004 when Chris Ault, who was the head coach at Nevada at the time, when he kind of put this whole thing in, where you're getting into a football world where the shotgun is becoming not just a third down thing, where it's becoming a first and second down thing because it just felt better on the quarterbacks. Quarterbacks just liked it better. We still do. But then one of the issues is gun runs from the shotgun. The shotgun gun runs can be a little not very diverse sometimes, right? We've gotten a lot better, but back then it wasn't super diverse because you had the back on one side. And so like what you could do was a little limited. Now, again, getting back to Utah and Urban Meyer in those days, it's like, okay, they figured out a way to be pretty good with the back offset. So like, yeah, you can figure it out, no problem. But that's I think why Alt gets into the pistol and says, okay, now I can go either direction. I don't have as many tells of where the ball is going to go. And I can still run basically all my stuff. But again, going back to the evolution of it, it's like, okay, this is a downhill type of offense. And then even now, so then Kaepernick goes to the 49ers, and what do? It's the same downhill type of, quarterback coming off the midline, and then the veer read and all that stuff. And then, hitting the Packers with that, arc block or split block, whatever it was. And he goes for a touchdown. Anyways, the Ravens right now, downhill, I don't think it's inside zone. I think they run duo with it, but it's like a duo read type of situation. So it's a downhill type of offense. And those are two, main teams. Obviously, you also have Robert Griffin in Washington in the early 2010s. But now we're seeing a very different style of offense with the pistol. And it plays into what we're seeing in the NFL a lot, which is the return to outside zone and outside zone boot. In the NFL, they're still liking it from under center. Like they want to go under center and do that. They feel comfortable for whatever reason to allow their quarterbacks to go under center. Obviously, you just see more under center in the NFL. And in college, well, how do we do that? Well, we can't really be an outside zone team if we're in gun. That's tough. Tough on the running back to understand how to cut and do stuff when his body is not, when he's got to go horizontally before he goes vertically.
Right.
So what's the best of both worlds? Well, it's getting in the pistol. And now you can go either direction, and you can have that same track for the running back that he would have if it was under center, but now he's in pistol. So I think that's kind of where the evolution has gone. I think it's really interesting, and I think it's going to continue to explode. I mean, I think the two future offenses it's just going to be the super spreader offense and pistol wide zone. Like those are the teams that are winning games. And what happens when you win games? Your coaches get poached.
Yes, sir.
This
is how the game goes. I mean, and this is, it's not, and to me, this is something that I'm actually going to start working on as well. Is like, and we were kind of talking about this with some other colleagues of ours. Like, it's also what you're talking about with pistol and outside zone is also tied to the rise in 12 personnel usage and how teams are using 12 personnel. And a lot of it now is saying like, hey, what two-back runs do we really like? Do we have a fullback? No. Is it easy to find a fullback? No. But we have another tight end, right? You can have a sixth offensive lineman or a seventh offensive lineman. And from there, you can kind of intimate some different type of two-back runs. An outside zone, in my opinion, works best when it's almost like a two-back look, right? Because you want to get into your bootlegs, your nakeds, all of that type of stuff, the deep play action shots. And that's stuff that we see in the NFL all the time. It's just that the NFL happens to be more comfortable with doing it from under center because that's where the coaching tree goes back to. Everything ties back to the 60s and 70s and the 80s where teams were doing this more often. So, it's funny to see how cyclical things are, and then to see, like, especially at the college level, for guys who maybe didn't grow up in it, but see the usage, see the benefit in having it as a piece of their offense and finding ways to contribute it, so even some of these air raid teams, they don't mind getting into, even if it's not 12 personnel, tight splits in pistol, and maybe you run an outside zone from there. So, you're starting to see a lot of different teams kind of adopt that and use that as an important piece to kind of add diversity to the run game. Like you said, the offset gun stuff. I mean, I'm a high school coach, and I can tell high school linebackers, hey, if the back is to you, that means that the run's probably not coming your way. Like, is it 100%? No, but the kind of runs that it requires in order to have the back be on your side and run your way, they're very specific and they're not easy to run. They're high investment, and most teams don't like running them for those reasons. Whereas if the back is away from me, hey, the ball's coming to me if it's run game, right? So there's a certain kind of predictability that offenses, I think, are realizing they have and are trying to get away from.
All right. So, like I said, this is the last episode of the PFF College Football Podcast. Now, the PFF College Football Podcast might return in a different form this season. I'm not exactly sure what's going on, but you will see me and Diante on a new podcast starting late August, and only because I'm going on vacation next week, so we're not recording anything. So yeah, you will see us next month, new podcast, and until then. Adios, and here's Nevada's quarterback, Carson Strong. In these uncertain times, life is full of questions like, when should I start thinking about life insurance? But however difficult these questions may be, Western and Southern can help you answer them. Backed by over 130 years of experience, together we can look ahead to leave the unknown behind. Western and Southern Financial Group, life insurance, retirement, and investments. Compensated endorser, products issued by member companies of Western and Southern Financial Group, Cincinnati, Ohio. All right, we are pleased to welcome Nevada starting quarterback Carson Strong to the podcast. Carson, how's it going?
Doing well. Thanks for having me on.
First question I have for you, can you throw mesh with your eyes closed?
Yes, I can.
I one year I had my quarterbacks do I think probably a 7-on-7 during practice with their eyes closed, and it went better than I expected. And it's like you can figure if you don't have any late coverage rotations, you could probably do some damage.
Yep. No, yeah. And I've done it so many times now. I've done that play thousands and thousands of times.
Can I ask you, what's your favorite variation of mesh? Do you like the running back rail route? Do you like the mesh with your slots and the speed outs on the outside? Or what's your preference?
I think just regular old trips right or trips left with the tag route on the outside. And then, you got your X and then your number 2 running the mesh. And then you got number 3 running a shoot. I think that's just the best way. I also like it at a 2x2. Our doubles with just the 2 slots running the mesh, and then the outside with the tag routes. I like that one too.
You threw the, I would call it the little 10 to 12 yard, 8 yard speed out on the money the whole season last year. I mean, that was it was so easy for you to go and get 8 yards like that, 10 yards like that, get a first down. One of the things that I thought you were, well, actually, I want to get back to before we get into last season and then going forward, starting your career, some ups and downs. I believe there was an injury in there. And then I think from let's say midway point in 2019 season up until right now, feels like everything changed and everything just maybe. So I'm curious from your perspective, was it a technical thing? Was it a mental thing? What exactly happened, do you think, to lead you to being one of the best quarterbacks in the country right now?
Yeah, well, I think, experience is something that you can't teach. And when I first started my playing career, I maybe didn't have the same confidence that I do now in just understanding what my job is. Football, it's the ultimate team sport. There's 11 guys on offense, 11 guys on defense. Each job is very specific and very unique skill set. And, I know what I need to do now at quarterback, what my job is. I know what the team needs me to do. I know what's required of me to be successful. And, that's just something that you earn over playing and getting experience.
So I kind of wanted to jump back into some football stuff. So one thing that I notice a lot when watching you guys play, and especially with you as a quarterback, is your comfort throwing the ball down the field, even when you guys are in 5-man protections. And that's not something that you see very often with college quarterbacks. So what was that process like? Did it take you a full maybe spring and fall to really get yourself comfortable with cutting it loose, even if you may take some late contact and stuff like that?
Yeah. So I basically had no clue about protections my first year as a starter. I could hardly tell when they were running cover 0 all out blitz on me, So, but I spent a lot of time on that. I'm even better at it now than I was last year. But, last year I had a pretty good understanding about protections and communicating with the center, make sure we got the right protection on. So, I got time to throw the ball.
what were the things you worked on specifically this offseason? I mean, you don't have to be too specific. I don't want you want to give away anything, but like, what were things you really felt like, hey, I need to improve this going into my last year, my 2021 season?
Yeah, I think that just being efficient as possible, just read the defense and take what they give me every single time, whether it's a run, quick game or a deep ball. I compare playing QB to boxing. It's like you got to give them a few left jabs, left jab, left jab. And then when the defense puts their hands down, that's when you go with the bomb and knock them out. So, I just want to take what they give me, but I'm still going to be really aggressive.
So kind of, off that point is something that I noticed. And I would say for last season, it was kind of almost like a turning point for you in your development as a quarterback. And that's going from the New Mexico game to the San Diego State game. I thought that they threw a lot of different pressures at you guys. And you can tell from one week to the next, seeing like kind of a similar scheme between New Mexico and San Diego State, that coming out of that week, it looked like you were a little bit more comfortable with, okay, if this is what I'm going to get from a defense, then I'll just take what it is that they give me. I don't have to try to make the play. I'll find the play when it presents itself. So what was that like going from one week to the next in terms of like getting over, dealing with the pressure, and then still being able to stay poised and push the ball down the field when you saw the opportunity?
Yeah, so I'm going to just start off with saying I'm very happy and grateful that I don't have to see Rocky Long ever again, because that dude knows how to get pressure on a QB. New Mexico was giving me all sorts of crazy looks. What I learned from this past season with all that is no matter how much you prepare, no matter all week, you're studying, you think that they're going to come out and do one thing, they can come out and do something completely different. And you just got to be ready for everything. There's a lot of teams that never rush 3 and drop 8 ever. They never show it on film once, and then they see us and they'll do it. Or, like New Mexico, they had 2 D linemen and 5 linebackers just stutting around. And I was actually talking to the New Mexico guys at media day, and I was like, man, thank God I don't got to see you guys again this year. But, you just got to be ready for everything as QB. I mean, you want to prepare as much as possible. You got to prepare for your opponent. But now I realize that when you're preparing, it's a lot of times you're seeing matchups like, okay, I see this corner. I think that I can win here if he's playing man, or, this linebacker, he tilts, the coverage, or the safety gives this coverage away. But, you got to be ready for anything. And every play is a new play. You got to come up. You got to see the safeties. You got to count the box. Every play is a new play, and they can do anything out there. So you got to be ready for all of it.
So it's interesting. You bring up 3-man rushes. You guys saw, oh man, I had this up before. I think 27% of your pass plays, you guys saw a 3-man rush, like specifically a 3-man rush. And it's something that me and Diante have talked about on this podcast a lot, especially when we look at another area team, Mississippi State, and they basically saw the most 3-man rushes in the history of college football last year. And it kind of stunted what they wanted to do, that's for sure. I mean, there were some other issues, but I think that stunted them a lot. When I look at your numbers, just as a passing offense, efficiency-wise, you guys are great pretty much against everything. You're a little less great against 3-man rushes. Like, you're still way above average, but it's not as good as I think you guys would have liked. Yeah. I would imagine you guys will see that next year. Now, I don't know what coverage you're going to get in the back end, whether it's double cloud, whether it's Tampa 2, whatever it might be. But is that something you guys have worked on, and how does the thought process change from a quarterback perspective when you're getting these type of looks?
Honestly, what I need to do when they're giving us these type of looks is just run the ball and get us into run plays. That's the best play. That's the best thing we can do, is whenever they're rushing 3 and dropping 8, just, let the backs eat, let the line work, and you just got to trust that. We can still throw into drop 8, but it's definitely better when you're running the ball into that type of coverage, because they're just basically saying that they're not respecting your run game at all. And that's what Hawaii did to us, which gave us some trouble. They double teamed and clouded Romeo every single play, but we're going to be ready for all that this year.
So one thing I wanted to ask you about, I think that, and this isn't just you guys, I think that a lot of quarterbacks now, especially with the amount of reps that guys are getting coming through high school into the college level, I know quarterbacks kind of, their eyes light up when they see cover one. If you see a post safety and guys are rolled up and playing tight coverage, you know exactly where you need to go with the football. So when you see that, what is your thought process like versus maybe when you're going to see a little bit more soft coverage or a little bit more unsure? Like, is there a pre-snap kind of checklist that you're working through? And when did you get most comfortable with that, over the past couple of seasons?
Yeah. So the first thing that I'm always looking for when I come up to the line of scrimmage is a one high or two high. Anytime you come up to the line of scrimmage as a QB and you see one safety in the middle of the field, they're not disguising anything. There's just one safety stuck in the middle of the field. It can only be two things. It can either be cover one or cover three. And both of those are, perfect looks to throw the ball because that just means that you got one-on-one matchups everywhere. Whenever it's cover one or cover three, I have a pretty good idea where I'm going to go with the ball. I still got to read it, but I'm pretty confident that, I'm going to make a quick throw or I'm going to look off the safety and throw a back shoulder or, I like my tight end on a out route or, it's all about matchups at that point. And so, pretty confident where you're going to go with the ball before you even get it. When you're reading two high covers, there's a lot of different things they can do. They can go Tampa 2, they can still roll it and go one high. They can go cover 4, so then that comes more of a lot of post snap reading and you gotta read it, get your full progression going.
One of the things that I thought was really interesting watching tape, I'm very curious about this. You tend to throw deep balls to the right receiver often. And it shows up in our data too. Not a lot of throws to the left, and you're very good at these throws, whether it's just a 9 ball down the sideline or even a post route where you guys are getting great looks, getting your slots matched up against safeties the whole season. But like, is that something that you're doing, or you just like I just like throwing to the right? Like,
I think it's just because number 7's over there.
Okay,
good answer.
That makes a lot of sense. That makes sense.
So, one thing I wanted to ask you as well, as we kind of get closer to wrapping this up is, do you have a favorite concept in your offense that you guys run? And, if you ever get time to watch other people, whether it's, as you prep throughout the week or in the off season or something like that, is there anything you see from other teams, NFL or college, where you're like, man, I wish we could incorporate that into what we do?
Yeah, so my favorite two concepts are wide cross and verticals because both those plays, it doesn't matter what coverage you're in, there's a beat
like an air raid quarterback to me.
Yeah. There's somewhere you can go with the ball. Just talking about wide cross, if it's one high, you got your flat vert on to the boundary side usually. And, if it's press man, you got a good chance at a back shoulder or over the top. Or the cross can still come open or the post curl. If it's split coverage, you got your crossing route taking the middle. And the post curl, that you can't go wrong reading the post curl side because that always comes open. And then verticals, the way that we're taught to run verticals is if they're playing man on you, you go over the top. But if they're bailing, then you just shut it down. Or if it's split coverage, you got wide taking the middle. So we're adjusting our routes to the coverage in those plays. And so that's why those plays are so hard to stop. And I guess like something that I see that, maybe we could incorporate more is getting into like nasty sets, like kind of like some bunch sets. There's a lot of like dirty things you can do out of that. But, we like to keep it simple and I like keeping it simple too. So we don't want to put too much.
One of the things I noticed looking through your tape was you have really great anticipation. Well, two things that I really noticed, like you compared to other air raid quarterbacks, and you guys being an air raid team, a team that passed the ball. I think you were 5th highest in pass rate last year. Some were like 64%. Again, not even close to the 80% that Mississippi State was doing last year, but still super high pass rate. Two things. I find you throw with I don't want to say better or worse, but like more consistent timing than other air raid quarterbacks that I've seen. And then the next thing that I thought was legit was your anticipation on in-breaking routes is top notch. Is that something that, especially the in-breaking routes, is that something that's come along? Those are the hardest routes to throw. So is it something that's come along as you've grown up basically? Or did you find that you always had this in your locker even from high school days?
Yeah, so I think that it's partly because I'm very comfortable with my guys and I've been working with them for a while now. But I really learned, my anticipation when I was playing scout team QB my freshman season. Because I mean, now our scout team QBs, they don't get touched, they're nice to them and all that. But when I was playing scout team QB, every single day was a battle. They're hitting me like it was, which I liked it though. I liked competing, but I had to get the ball in my hands fast. I had 1, 2, 3 throw, or else I was getting popped in the mouth. So I think that I learned my anticipation skills from my scout team QB days.
Go ahead, D.
Oh no, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So another thing, you guys are getting back Elijah Cooks this year. What does that mean, do you think, for the offense going forward? An already great offense. What can that mean?
Yeah, it means a lot. It means that you can't double team everybody out there. You got to leave somebody with a bad matchup somewhere. You go in, split safeties, cover 2. You got our big tight end Cole Turner working on a backer over the middle. You got one high. Now you got one-on-one matchups with Elijah and Romeo. It's I live in a quarterback heaven at Nevada, having all these receivers, and all I can say is good luck.
Is there any quarterback that you like, say, at the NFL level or even college level, that you either grew up trying to mirror your game around, or someone now who you take a lot from?
Yeah, so when I was a kid, my idol was Peyton Manning. I used to hold the ball by my ear and try to throw super traditional. That's obviously changed. I have a little bit more of a relaxed, smoother motion now. But, Peyton Manning, I just thought that he was, great. He controlled the game with his mind. And I think that's what I do because, I'm not going to beat anyone with my athleticism. But, I'm pretty confident in my abilities, just reading coverage and, hitting open guys. But my favorite guy now is Joe Burrow. I loved watching him at LSU, just like his story coming from Ohio State, and just he was balling at LSU. And that's the type of offense that we want to run here at Nevada this year is, we want to run a lot of empty and, just test teams, pushing vertical, put 5 wide receivers in the game and make them defend us. I kind of describe us this year as, I'm like Magic Johnson in the fast break alley-oop offense because we just got boys all over the place and, they make me look good. So Joe Burrow, he's definitely a guy that I've studied a lot and learned a lot from. And, I'm rooting for him in the league too.
So last year you guys played, obviously everyone's season was weird last year. Mostly, so you just play in conference and then you see Tulane in the bowl game. This year, 2 tough out of conference teams. You start with Cal, I believe, and then I think week 3 you have Kansas State. How excited are you for these type of big games to really put yourselves on the map with the team that you guys have and with the offense that you guys have?
Yeah, a lot of people have said, what are you going to do with the harder schedule, and just saying that it looks tougher for us, but we don't look at it that way. We look at those are bigger opportunities for us. These are opportunities that Nevada football teams don't see very often. This is a Nevada football team that Reno doesn't see very often. We're a very talented team on both sides of the ball. This is the best defense I've seen since I've been here. This is the best O-line. Our receivers are outstanding. Our corners are competing. This is definitely the best group I've seen at Nevada. And so, we think that it's a blessing that we got these teams this year. If a Nevada football team is ever going to go in and beat Cal and Kansas State and, then at Boise State after that and run the table, go to New Year's Six Bowl, that's this Nevada team right here. But we don't want to just be a regular Nevada team that wins 8 games and goes to the Idaho Potato Bowl. Nah, we got a little bit bigger goals than that this year.
So actually, you bringing up the schedule kind of taps into a question that I was looking to ask. I think that we too often treat quarterbacks as robots, and that all you guys care about is just, hitting the field, reading through your progressions, and getting the ball out of your hands. But when you look at the schedule, is there anything that you see for you competitively where you think like, okay, I know I want to be my bet? Obviously, you want to play well every week, but is there an opponent that you look at, you're like, I want to be on fire, when we come to see them?
Yeah, when we go and play Cal, I'm going to play my best game. I grew up I watched Jared Goff, I watched Aaron Rodgers, I watched Marshawn Lynch, Deshaun Jackson. I went to games growing up as a kid, and my hometown is less than an hour away from Berkeley. I went to football camps there. My 7-on-7 coach, Maurice Jones-Drew, tried telling Cal about me, but they told me I was too raw. That's what they said. And so, I'm looking forward to going in there and just having fun playing in a school that as a kid, I used to go watch games there. And, I'm definitely looking forward to Cal.
You talked about before, well, you talked about like Cal thinking you were too raw. But then you also talked about how you've kind of changed your mechanics, just at least with your pre-snap ball placement. You talked about, speaking of Cal, like the guy who I learned that stuff from was Jeff Tedford, where you talked about putting the ball on the shelf. So you said you've relaxed, and you can see it on your film. You're very bouncy out there sometimes, being able to like move around and make a play. When did that change, and how has that helped you become the quarterback you are?
Yeah, so that 7-on-7 team I was playing for with Maurice Jones-Drew, my quarterback coach, his name was Matt Gutierrez. He played at Michigan and he played for the Patriots for a few years, and he's very knowledgeable about the quarterback position. And he's all about just finding your natural arm slot. Every QB, they throw from a different arm slot. And he kind of like incorporated, like when you see Patrick Mahomes throw the ball, it kind of looks like he slings it. He doesn't have a traditional throwing motion. He like kind of just slings it. That's what it looks like. That's the best way to describe his throwing motion. And, that's what I try to do is just kind of sling it. I don't think about, throwing sidearm or anything, but you just want to be loose and find your natural little arm slot. Being super over the top is usually not like the best way. Some guys, it feels good for them to throw it like that. But for me, it feels a little bit better, a little more, just gunslinger-ish, a little bit more sidearm, and just kind of gunning it, letting it loose.
This was great. I'm very appreciative of you coming on the podcast and talking us through what you plan on doing this year. And honestly, I know me and Diante, after watching your tape, we're like unbelievably impressed. Like you're a legitimately awesome quarterback to watch. If anyone listening, go try and find either last year's Nevada games or go watch them this year, because I think the offense, and maybe I should say this out loud, but me and Diante have said some negative things about the air raid offense, and then kind of watching you guys play it, I was like, oh my God, I remember why I love this offense so much. So we're both very appreciative of getting to watch your film, because it's very good. So thanks for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, we appreciate it too. Thank you for the support. We got a good team in Nevada this year. Anyone listening, if you're on the East Coast, put on one of our late night games. We won't disappoint.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Carson.
Appreciate it.